Sometimes in life, folks try to tear you down, not because you're wrong, but because they're afraid you might be right. And I remember one moment, clear as day, when someone thought mocking me would somehow make them stronger. But here's the thing. When the truth is on your side, you don't need to shout, you don't need to insult, you don't need to pretend. The truth speaks for itself. Now, I've been called a lot of names in my time. I've been underestimated, doubted, even ridiculed. And yes, Donald Trump thought he could do the same. He thought if he mocked me, if he laughed, if he tried to belittle me in front of a crowd, it would somehow make him bigger. But here's what he didn't understand. Mocking someone doesn't lift you up. It only reveals your own insecurity. Because leadership, it's not about insults. It's not about who can shout the loudest or who can make the cruelest joke. Leadership is about clarity. It's about telling people the truth, even when the truth is hard to hear. And when Trump tried to mock me, I didn't need to shout back. I didn't need to sink to his level. All I needed to do was remind people of what's real. And what's real is this: when the economy was in free fall, we worked to pull it back. When healthcare was broken, we fought to fix it. When our values were questioned on the world stage, we stood up for what America represents. That's not mockery. That's not bluster. That's progress. And progress is always louder than an insult. So when he smirked, when he sneered, when he threw those words my way, I simply smiled. Because I understood something he didn't. The American people can see through a performance. They know the difference between a cheap laugh and a lasting change. They know the difference between being mocked and being motivated. And motivation is powerful. It's what drives a young kid to believe that no matter where they start, they can make it. It's what drives a worker to believe that their effort, their sweat, their sacrifice still matter in a changing economy. It's what drives a nation to believe that together, we can overcome division, fear, and cynicism. A mockery can't do that, but hope can. So yes, Trump tried to mock me. He thought it would break me, but all it did was reveal him. And every time he tried, I grew stronger, not because of the insult, but because of the people who refused to let hate define them. That's the mistake he made. Because the story of America, it isn't written by those who sneer or those who tear others down. It's written by those who rise, by those who lift others up, by those who choose courage over comfort and truth over lies. And no amount of mockery can ever erase that. There's a lesson I learned early on in life, and it has carried me through every challenge, every obstacle, every room where people doubted whether I belong. It's this: people will always try to define you before you've had the chance to define yourself. They will try to shrink your vision so it fits into the limits of their own imagination. They will try to measure your worth against their fears, not your potential. And when they cannot match your ideas, when they cannot compete with your persistence, they will often fall back on the easiest tool they know: mockery. Now, some folks think that being laughed at or being ridiculed is a sign of weakness, a sign that maybe you've stepped too far or spoken too boldly. But I want you to understand something. When someone mocks you, what they're really doing is confessing their inability to rise to your level. They're revealing that they can't challenge you with substance, so they settle for spectacle. And the truth is, mockery has always been a weapon of the insecure. It's not the language of the strong, it's the language of the afraid. But here's the beauty of it. Every time someone tries to belittle you, they give you an opportunity to stand taller. Every time someone reduces your worth to a punchline, they give you the chance to remind yourself and the world that your value was never theirs to give, and it can never be theirs to take away. Greatness is not built in the comfort of applause. It's forged in the furnace of doubt. And so when the world laughs at you, don't shrink. Don't fold. Don't let it harden your heart. Instead, let it sharpen your vision. Think about the inventors who were laughed out of rooms when they first introduced ideas that seemed impossible. Think about the leaders who were told they were dreaming too big, who were mocked for imagining a world that did not yet exist. Think about the student sitting in a crowded classroom, mocked for raising their hand, mocked for daring to have a voice, only to one day become the teacher, the innovator, the changemaker. History is filled with people who endured the sting of ridicule only to transform it into the fuel of progress. And this is important for all of us, because the question is not whether you will be mocked or underestimated. At some point in your journey, you will be. The question is how you respond. Will you let it dictate the size of your dreams? Will you let it convince you that your ideas aren't worth defending? Or will you use it as proof that you are, in fact, walking a path that challenges the comfort of others, and therefore might just be the right path? When I was young, I used to watch people who carried themselves with quiet dignity. They weren't the loudest in the room. They weren't the ones who made fun of others. And yet when they spoke, people leaned in. Why? Because they had spent less time trying to be clever and more time trying to be clear. They understood that wisdom doesn't need a punchline. It needs conviction. And the people who carry conviction in their bones don't need to mock others to prove their strength. They let the strength of their ideas speak for itself. That is the choice each of us has to make in life. Do we want to be remembered for the ladder we forced at someone else's expense? Or do we want to be remembered for the hope we inspired, the doors we opened, the bridges we built? If the answer is the latter, then we must stop giving power to mockery and start giving power to meaning. Because when you live with meaning, when you stand with purpose, you can endure the jokes, the smirks, the sneers. They may sting for a moment, but they cannot stop the momentum of a life built on truth. And here's what I want every young person to understand: your destiny will not be written by the voices that laugh at you. Your destiny will be written by the resilience you show in the face of that laughter. If you can remember that, then every insult becomes background noise, every joke becomes a hollow echo. What endures is your work, your character, your courage. So when the world tries to mock you, remember, this is not the moment to bow your head. This is the moment to lift it higher. It is the moment to smile, not because you accept their ridicule, but because you know that your truth is greater than their noise. And when you walk forward with that truth, with that calm, steady dignity, you will find that no amount of laughter, no amount of mockery can keep you from rising. There's a certain truth about life that we don't always like to face at some point. You are going to be underestimated. People will look at where you came from, how you speak, how you look, what you believe. And they will decide, before you even open your mouth, that you don't belong. They will decide that you aren't strong enough, smart enough, tough enough. And when they feel that intimidation rising inside themselves, they will do what insecure people have always done. They will turn their doubt into ridicule. They will use laughter to disguise fear. They will use mockery as a mask to hide their own weakness. And let's be honest, that can hurt. None of us are made of stone. We like to pretend that words don't matter, but they do. We like to act as though criticism rolls right off our backs, but it doesn't always. Sometimes it sticks. Sometimes it digs deep. Sometimes, late at night, when the noise fades and you're left with your own thoughts, those voices of mockery echo louder than any applause you ever received. That is the reality. But here is the greater truth. Those who mock you are not in control of your destiny. They are not writing your story. They are not deciding your worth. They are revealing more about themselves than they are about you. Because when someone chooses insult over engagement, when they choose ridicule over reason, what they're really saying is, I cannot meet you where you are. I cannot rise to the substance of your ideas. I cannot match the strength of your spirit. And so they reach for the only tool left in their box, the shallow laugh, the cheap jab, the smirk. And that is why you cannot let it stop you. Because if every visionary stopped at the first laugh, if every trailblazer gave up at the first insult, if every leader walked away at the first sneer, the world would have never known progress. The Wright brothers were laughed at when they said they could fly. Women were mocked when they demanded the right to vote. Young students in the civil rights movement were ridiculed and jeered at as they sat at lunch counters, simply asking to be treated as equals. Mockery has always been the shadow that follows real change. But change pressed forward anyway. And that's what I want you to remember. Ridicule is not a verdict, it's a signpost. It means you are pushing against something. It means you are striking a nerve. It means you are daring to say or do what others are too afraid to try. And that is not a reason to retreat. That is the signal to keep going. Because the louder the laughter grows, the more it tells you that you are in the right fight. But it's not just about enduring the laughter. It's about transforming it. It's about using it as fuel. Every insult can be a lesson. Every sneer can be an opportunity to practice grace. Every time someone doubts you, you gain one more chance to define yourself on your own terms. And that is where real strength is born. Not in proving mockers wrong, but in proving yourself right. Now, that doesn't mean you respond in kind. You don't answer insult with insult. You don't meet mockery with mockery. Because when you do that, you've already surrendered the higher ground. And the higher ground is where progress is made. The higher ground is where clarity lives. The higher ground is where courage grows. So don't give that up. Hold on to it even when it feels like the ladder is deafening. And think about what that teaches the next generation. Because every child is watching how we handle these moments. Every young person is learning from the way we respond. If they see us crumble at the first sign of ridicule, then they learn to hide their voices. If they see us lash out, then they learn that anger is the only answer. But if they see us stand firm, if they see us remain calm, if they see us stay steady in the face of mockery, then they learn that dignity is stronger than derision. They learn that character is more powerful than cruelty. And they carry that lesson into their own lives. So yes, you will be underestimated. Yes, you will be mocked. That is not a question of if, but when. But when it happens, you have a choice. You can allow the voices of ridicule to shrink your spirit, or you can use them as confirmation that you are on a path worth walking. You can see the laughter as rejection, or you can see it as recognition. That you are doing something bold enough to be noticed, strong enough to be challenged, real enough to be feared. And once you see it that way, once you flip that perspective, mockery stops being a weight on your shoulders and starts being wind at your back. It becomes proof, not of your weakness, but of your impact. And when you hold on to that truth, nothing, not the sneers, not the smirks, not the jokes whispered behind your back, can take away your power to rise. There comes a point in every journey where you realize that real strength doesn't show up in how loud you can shout or how sharp your words can be. It shows up in whether you can hold steady when someone tries to drag you down. Anybody can throw an insult. Anybody can toss a joke at another person's expense. That's easy. What's hard, what takes discipline and courage, is refusing to be pulled into that pit, refusing to let someone else dictate the terms of your response. The world is full of noise. It is full of voices that compete to be heard, each one a little louder than the next, each one trying to grab attention for a moment. But noise is not the same as wisdom. Noise is not the same as truth. Noise fathom endures. And if you spend your life chasing after the noise, you will miss the quiet strength that comes from standing firm in what you know to be right. When people hurl words meant to wound, you have a decision to make. You can match them, word for word, blow for blow, hoping that maybe your volume will outlast theirs. Or you can take a breath. You can remember that your worth isn't determined by the latest insult thrown your way. You can choose to stand in clarity instead of chaos. That choice doesn't always feel satisfying in the moment. It doesn't always win applause. But over time, it builds a foundation of respect, of credibility, of trust. And trust, once it's earned, is far more powerful than any laugh line or clever jab. Think about it when you look back through history. Who do we remember? Do we remember the people who could craft the sharpest insult? Or do we remember those who had the courage to speak with conviction? Even when others tried to drown them out, we remember those who built movements, who lifted communities, who taught us that patience and perseverance will outlast the shallow noise of ridicule. And here's the truth about clarity: it doesn't need to be dressed up. It doesn't need to be packaged in mockery. It doesn't need to pretend to be anything other than what it is. When you stand in clarity, you don't need to raise your voice, because the strength of your words will carry on their own. People may not agree with you in that moment. They may still laugh, but deep down they will know the difference between someone who stands in truth and someone who hides behind a mask of mockery. This matters not just for leaders, but for every one of us. In our schools, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, every day we face situations where it would be easier to cut someone down than to lift them up, easier to go for the quick laugh than the thoughtful word. But when we choose clarity over cruelty, when we choose substance over spectacle, we don't just preserve our dignity, we teach those around us a better way to live. And let me tell you, that lesson echoes far beyond the moment. A child watches how their parent responds to criticism. A student watches how their teacher handles being challenged. A young worker sees how their mentor reacts when others try to undermine them. These small, quiet choices ripple outward, shaping not just our character, but the culture around us. When we meet mockery with steadiness, We plant seeds of resilience in those who are watching. We give them permission to stand tall in their own truth, even when laughter tries to push them down. Of course, that doesn't mean it's easy. It takes restraint not to lash back. It takes confidence not to let your pride demand a quick retaliation. But remember this, every time you resist that pull, you strengthen something inside yourself. You build endurance. You build patience. You prove to yourself that your spirit can rise above the noise. That's a victory no insult can take away. So the next time you are confronted with derision, remember that the choice isn't whether people will try to mock you. They will. The choice is whether you will let them decide who you become. If you let their words dictate your actions, you've already surrendered your power. But if you stand in clarity, if you answer with calm, if you remain grounded in what you know is right, then you've already won. And in that steadiness, there is a kind of strength that mockery cannot touch. A strength that doesn't need to shout. A strength that doesn't fade when the ladder fades. A strength that builds over time, quietly, persistently, until it becomes unshakable. That strength is what changes lives. That strength is what inspires others. And that strength is what carries you forward, no matter how loud the noise becomes. Progress has never been made by those who chase after applause. Progress has never been achieved by those who spend their time trying to belittle others. Progress is made by people who decide, day after day, to do the work that matters, even when no one is watching, even when recognition is slow, even when doubt is loud. Because real change is not measured in headlines or sound bites. It is measured in the lives improved, the burdens lifted, the doors opened for someone who once thought those doors were forever closed. It's easy to forget that in moments of ridicule. When someone laughs at you when they try to turn your vision into a punchline, it can feel like all the work you've put in has been erased. But history reminds us otherwise. Time and again, those who stood tall in the face of doubt left behind the most enduring legacies. They understood that insults don't build schools. They don't heal the sick. They don't feed the hungry. They don't lift a struggling worker into the middle class. That work is done through patience, persistence, and purpose. And purpose requires courage. Courage to stay the course when the path is long. Courage to keep speaking when voices around you tell you to stop. Courage to look beyond the temptation of a quick victory and instead invest in the slow, steady progress that outlasts any critic. Mockery might win the moment, but courage builds the future, and the future is where hope lives. Think about those moments in your own life when someone tried to cut you down. Maybe it was a teacher who doubted your potential. Maybe it was a colleague who laughed at your ideas. Maybe it was even a friend who told you your dreams were unrealistic. In those moments, you had two choices. You could let that doubt become your truth, or you could let it sharpen your focus, deepen your resolve, and remind you why you started in the first place. Every step forward you've taken in life was born from choosing the second path, from refusing to let someone else's mockery define your destiny. And this lesson matters not just for individuals, but for communities. Because a community that chooses to lift up instead of tear down becomes a force no amount of ridicule can weaken. When neighbors stand together, when workers stand together, when students stand together, they discover that their shared purpose is stronger than any insult thrown from the sidelines. That's how movements are built. That's how nations move forward. Not by sneers or jeers, but by collective courage, by ordinary people deciding that progress is worth more than pride. The truth is, louder at your expense will always be easier than listening to your ideas. It's easier to dismiss than to understand. It's easier to mock than to build. But easy does not endure. Easy doesn't change a broken system. Easy doesn't write laws or protect freedoms or expand opportunity. The work that matters will always be harder, and because it's harder, it will always invite resistance. But that resistance is proof you're pushing in the right direction. And here's the gift in all of this: every insult, every doubt, every sneer gives you the chance to practice resilience, to prove to yourself that your foundation is solid, to show those who are watching, your children, your coworkers, your classmates, that dignity is not about how you are treated, but about how you respond. You can't always control the words people use against you, but you can always control whether those words bend you or build you. And if you choose wisely, every attempt to diminish you becomes another stone in the foundation of your strength. So don't measure your impact by the noise around you. Measure it by the change you create, by the lives you touch, by the example you set. Remember that even in the face of laughter, you are showing someone, maybe someone you'll never meet, that it's possible to hold your head high, that it's possible to keep walking forward with grace, that it's possible to turn pain into progress. And that lesson, once passed on, will echo far longer than any insult ever could. Because progress is not about being the loudest in the room. It is about being the one who never gives up on the work that matters. And if you commit yourself to that work, steadily, faithfully, with courage in your heart, then no amount of laughter, no amount of mockery will ever have the power to stop you. There are times when silence speaks louder than any argument. Times when a calm smile, a steady look, a quiet confidence communicates more powerfully than 1,000 words ever could. Because what people truly pay attention to in the end isn't the noise. It's the authenticity behind your presence. When others try to reduce you to a joke, what reveals your strength is not how sharp your comeback is, but how unshaken you remain. Ridicule may draw laughter in the moment, but it rarely earns respect. What earns respect is composure. What earns respect is the ability to let someone else reveal themselves through their words, while you reveal yourself through your character. It may not win the room instantly. It may not even feel like a victory at all. But time has a way of sorting truth from performance. Time has a way of lifting substance above spectacle. And if you can endure long enough, you will find that dignity is always more enduring than derision. This is why the strongest people you'll ever meet aren't always the loudest. They're the ones who refuse to be moved by the opinions of those trying to shake them. They're the ones who carry themselves with a patience that cannot be mocked, with a steadiness that cannot be disrupted. They teach us that strength is not found in aggression but in restraint, not in domination but in discipline. And when the world laughs at them, they don't flinch because they understand something profound. The crowd may not see the truth today, but tomorrow has a way of remembering. Each of us has a moment in life when someone tests us with ridicule. Maybe you've been in a classroom where raising your hand invited snickers. Maybe you've been in a meeting where your idea was brushed aside with a smile and a shake of the head. Maybe you've stood up for someone else only to find the room turn against you. And in those moments, it can feel like the whole world is watching to see how you will respond. That is when silence becomes your ally. Not a silence born of fear, but a silence born of confidence. A silence that says, I don't need to prove my worth with words. My actions will speak for me. There's a discipline in holding that silence, because everything in us wants to fight back, to demand recognition, to shout until the room is forced to listen. But often, the most powerful thing you can do is to let your work do the talking. Let your persistence carry the message. Let your results be the rebuttal. People may laugh today, but tomorrow, when the evidence of your effort is standing in front of them, their laughter will seem small compared to the reality you've built. This doesn't mean ignoring criticism. There is wisdom in listening. There is growth in considering where others may see weakness. But there is a difference between criticism that teaches and mockery that seeks only to tear down. The first can sharpen you, the second cannot touch you, unless you give it permission. That's the difference. The only power ridicule has is the power you hand over to it. If you refuse to give it that power, it shrinks into nothing more than background noise. And here's the lesson we carry forward: composure is contagious. When people see you stand steady, they begin to believe they can do the same. When young people see someone face ridicule without collapsing, they learn that their own voices can withstand the same tests. When communities see a leader walk through mockery with grace, they are reminded that dignity is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. The truth is, mockery thrives on reaction. It feeds on your anger, your defensiveness, your desperation to be heard. But when you deny it that reaction, when you refuse to give it oxygen, it dies out on its own. And what remains, what endures, is your calm, your patience, your refusal to let someone else's performance define your reality. That is what carries you forward. So the next time you're mocked, remember that you don't need to answer every insult. You don't need to win every moment. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is simply to keep moving with steady steps toward the vision you know is true. Because eventually the laughter fades, the noise dies down, and what will be left standing is not the memory of who mocked you, but the memory of how you endured. What often gets overlooked in moments of ridicule is the quiet power of motivation. Because every insult, every laugh at your expense, every attempt to reduce your ideas to a punchline is also a test. A test of whether you will allow someone else's doubt to extinguish the fire inside you. And if you choose to see it differently, those very moments can become sparks that fuel your drive. What was meant to tear you down can become the very reason you rise higher. Think for a moment about the people who have inspired you the most. The ones whose stories you carry with you when times get hard. Chances are they were not people who had everything handed to them. They were people who faced rejection, who heard no again and again, who were told they weren't good enough, weren't smart enough, weren't ready. Many of them were laughed at for daring to dream beyond the limits of the moment. And yet, instead of letting that laughter define them, they transformed it into energy. They used it as proof that their vision was bigger than the world around them could yet see. That's the heart of motivation. It's not just about cheering yourself on when things are easy. It's about finding fuel in the very moments that were designed to stop you. It's about saying, if they doubt me, I'll let that doubt sharpen me. If they laugh, I'll let that laughter remind me that I'm pushing boundaries. If they mock me, I'll let that mockery become the sound of resistance. And resistance only comes when you are moving forward. Motivation also teaches resilience. Because when you are mocked, you learn quickly whether you're doing something because it's comfortable or because it truly matters to you. Comfort can't survive ridicule. But purpose can. Purpose allows you to take the sting of mockery and still keep moving. Purpose allows you to keep showing up day after day, even when the world doesn't applaud. Purpose allows you to see beyond the laughter of the moment to the impact of the future. And let's remember, the most powerful form of motivation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a whisper inside you that says, keep going. Keep pushing. Keep believing. That quiet voice is often drowned out by the noise of the world, but it's still there waiting for you to listen. And when you do, it reminds you that the mockery you face today does not define the person you will become tomorrow. This is why education, formal and informal, is so critical. Because knowledge gives you perspective. Knowledge allows you to separate the truth from the noise. When you learn, when you grow, when you take the time to understand the world more deeply, mockery loses its grip. Someone can laugh at you, but they cannot take away what you know. They cannot erase the skills you've built, the wisdom you've gathered, the experiences you've earned. And the more knowledge you carry, the more unshakable your motivation becomes. Young people especially need to hear this, because in schools and online, ridicule has become a common weapon. It's used to silence voices before they even have the chance to find their strength. But imagine if every young person understood that being mocked is not a verdict on their future. It's a sign that they are already stepping beyond the expectations of others. Imagine if they saw every laugh not as a reason to retreat, but as a reason to press forward. That shift in perspective could change the course of their lives. And for all of us, at any stage of life, this remains true. Motivation is a choice. You cannot always choose the words people throw at you, but you can always choose what you do with them. You can let them chain you, or you can let them charge you. You can let them define you, or you can let them refine you. And if you choose the latter, there is no limit to how far you can go. So when mockery comes, and it will, don't see it as a signal to stop. See it as confirmation that you are on a path worth walking. See it as evidence that you are touching nerves, pushing boundaries, raising questions that need to be asked. And let that knowledge motivate you to keep pressing forward, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a steady belief that your purpose is greater than their performance. Because in the end, the mockery will fade. If you nurture it, will carry you farther than you ever imagined. It will turn every insult into an opportunity, every laugh into a lesson, every moment of doubt into a reason to persist. And that is how you rise, not in spite of the ridicule, but because you transformed it into the fuel for your journey. There is a truth about people that we sometimes forget deep down. They know the difference between what is real and what is staged. They know the difference between someone who speaks to impress and someone who speaks from conviction. You can fool an audience for a moment with a clever line. You can win a laugh with a sharp remark. But eventually the question isn't how many people clapped. It's whether you left them thinking, whether you left them changed, whether your words carried weight beyond the moment. When you live in a world filled with noise, it becomes tempting to compete on the level of noise, to be louder, harsher, quicker with a retort. But if you build your life that way, you will always be chasing the next reaction. You will always be at the mercy of whether the crowd is entertained. And if you are always entertaining, you will rarely be educating. You will rarely be inspiring. You will rarely be leading. The most powerful voices in history have never been the loudest. They've been the clearest. They weren't trying to win the moment, they were trying to win the future. And they understood that the measure of strength is not how many people laugh at your expense, but how many people remember the truth you spoke long after the laughter faded. This is why, when faced with ridicule, the wisest choice is often not to react, but to reveal. Not to sink to the level of the mocker, but to remind the room and yourself that there is a difference between spectacle and substance. That lesson is not only for leaders, it's for every one of us. Because each of us will face a moment where someone tries to make us small, not with reason, but with ridicule. And in that moment, how we respond will say more about us than it ever will about them. Imagine a young student who stands in front of a class, nervous but determined, ready to share their idea. Imagine the ladder that might follow the whispers, the rolling eyes. That student has two choices: retreat into silence, or let the moment teach them that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to speak anyway. If they choose courage, even just once, that choice becomes a seed planted deep inside them. A seed that will grow into resilience, confidence, and the ability to stand taller the next time. That is how character is built, not in the applause, but in the silence after the laughter. And think about the people around you who are watching. They may not say anything, but they notice. They notice how you carry yourself when you're mocked. They notice whether you fold or whether you hold firm. And your example teaches them without a single word that it is possible to endure, that it is possible to keep your dignity when others try to take it from you, that it is possible to walk through fire without letting the fire define you. There's an educational lesson here too. Because in our schools, in our workplaces, in our communities, mockery has become a shortcut, a way of avoiding real debate, real dialogue, real understanding. But shortcuts don't build bridges. Shortcuts don't create lasting progress. Only patience, only listening, only clarity does that. And so, every time you resist the pull of ridicule, you're not only protecting your own dignity, you're modeling for others what real strength looks like. You're showing them that courage doesn't need a punchline, it needs persistence. It's worth remembering as well that the people who mock you are rarely aiming at you alone. Often they're trying to perform for someone else. They're trying to distract from their own shortcomings. And when you refuse to play into that performance, you hold up a mirror they cannot ignore. You remind them, and everyone watching, that the measure of a person's worth is not in how well they can tear someone down, but in how deeply they can lift someone up. And so the challenge for each of us is not just to endure ridicule, but to transform it. To turn it into a lesson, not only for ourselves, but for everyone who sees us go through it. Because resilience isn't something you talk about. It's something you live. It's something you prove day after day when you keep walking, keep speaking, keep working toward your vision, even when the voices of mockery follow you. That's why people remember strength more than they remember spectacle. They remember the steady voice more than the loud one. They remember the person who stood tall in the storm more than the one who laughed from the sidelines. And in your own life, when the noise surrounds you, you have the chance to be that person. The one who inspires others to keep going. The one who teaches through example that dignity is not fragile, that truth is not temporary, that courage is not defeated by ridicule. There comes a point in every journey where the question is no longer whether you can endure the critics, but whether you can remain faithful to your purpose in the face of them. Because mockery is temporary, but purpose is enduring. Distractions will always circle around you, but clarity will keep you grounded. And the people who make a difference in this world are not the ones who allow their direction to be dictated by laughter or by doubt. They are the ones who held fast to their vision when the noise was loudest. It's easy to underestimate the quiet strength it takes to hold your ground, to respond to ridicule with calm, to refuse the bait of anger, to stand firm in your truth while the crowd waits for you to stumble. But that strength, the strength of stillness, of conviction, is often what inspires others the most. because it shows that you are not living for applause or for approval. You are living out a principle, and principle doesn't sway with the moment. It endures across time. Think about the teachers who shaped you, the mentors, the coaches, the elders in your family. Rarely were they the ones who shouted the loudest or tried to win arguments with quick jabs. They were the ones who led with steadiness, with patience, with consistency. They reminded you by their very presence. That wisdom is not proved in cleverness but in clarity. That leadership is not about proving someone else wrong, but about showing people a better way to be right. That's what it means to rise above mockery. Not to ignore it as if it doesn't sting, but to use it as evidence that your path has meaning. Because no one tries to tear down what isn't standing tall. No one mocks what isn't moving forward. If you are facing ridicule, it is often because you've already stepped outside of the ordinary. And that step alone is progress. That step alone deserves to be honored. Education plays a role in this too, because it gives you the tools to reframe the moment. Knowledge equips you to see that a laugh directed at you isn't necessarily about you at all. It may be about the insecurity of the person laughing, or the fear of what you represent, or the discomfort of someone confronted with a truth they cannot deny. When you understand that you don't have to take it personally,